you for joining me. Now, I'm glad you agreed to do this with me. So let's start from the most pressing one. What is the IMF, or who is the IMF?
Let me break it down basically, because when we keep hearing for the past 1 week, IMF, someone asked him, or that's in our colloquial language, what is it? Basically, IMF is an institution where countries have decided to converge and contribute money to a pool of funds, where in cases where their economies are suffering, they can decide to tap into it and receive loans less than, at a rate less than what banks will give them. So it's basically countries supporting themselves with a pool of funds at a place and help them recover the economy. That's how it runs. So it runs like a policy, that is insurance policy, where you contribute to a pool of fund in case you get involved in an accident. They can take money from there and sort you out.
Is there a specific criteria that a country has to meet to be a part of the IMF?
So long as you are a contributor to the fund and you've subscribed to the conditions that gives you access to the funds, basically you can tap in anytime you want.
Do we know some of the conditions?
The conditions are not straitjacket because economies differ. Economies in Nigeria, the factors differ. For instance, in Ghana, our inflation may be going up, but compared to Nigeria, it is far higher. So when they are about to determine the conditions that will make you have access to the loan, they will first of all assess and see whether you are worthy of the amount that you're demanding and whether which sectors is it necessary for them to assist you in those areas.
Right. So the IMF standing for the International Monetary Fund. If there's another word we've heard this week or over the weekend, is the word bailout. What is a bailout?
A bailout is like to save you out of it, to bail you out. For instance, if someone is in prison, you heard, I'm going to bail you. That means you are in a situation where your fundamental, basically economic-wise, your economic fundamentals are not quite good. In the instances where investors don't have confidence in your economy, inflation rate is high beyond control, where your policy rate is making it difficult for private sector to engage in activities, where businesses are consistently lamenting that they don't have access to cheap capital to expand their operations, where labor unions are making demands at a point where government cannot meet those demands because they have financing constraints, at a point where the debt of the country is beyond average. So all these factors cumulatively is a cry for a bailout, because at that time the economy becomes constrained. You can't invest in capital expenditure. You can't invest in enterprise, a new project that will see economic revival in the near future. So in this instance, there is no breathing space where we can say the economy has enough money or the government has money to invest. Initially, we understood that the priority of government was then that the E-Levy has a projected revenue stance. That is to rake in over 600,000 within a period. But looking at what was happening, it appeared that the target was short met. Even though the initial inception, we saw fight in the House of Parliament. First of all, it should have been a signal that if the House of Parliament, which is a representative of the people, sends that signal then, where there is serious contention, that means the market behavior will also be reversed. So in the market, consumer behavior came by, where citizens were of the view that this E-Levy, you are taking my money. Therefore, it is not logical, although it is necessary as a nation. We need it to fill our deficit. But here we are. We couldn't meet up our target in the first 6 months of the year, but we are hoping that there will be a new revival with this onset of IMF policy.
Right. We've established that the E-Levy is not raking in much as we expect. Do you think Ghana can gather enough revenue to prevent us from going to the IMF?
Ghana, honestly, we have great potential as a country. When it comes to tourism, we have excellent potential because our tourism sector could generate, if we put in more investment in all our tourist sites and also structure our tourism sector in terms of travel and tour, trust me, we can make huge sums of money compared to what France is also making in their country. We can also depend on agriculture, which usually was contributing enormously to our GDP. As of now, it seems like we are not doing much Compared to services, now the service sector is increasing in terms of contribution to GDP. We have manufacturing, which is contributing minimally to GDP. So all these factors, if we have targeted policy at service sector, and manufacturing sector, at agriculture sector, trust me, we can rake in without foreign support, because technically, as we speak now, about 80% of our budget is all foreign supported.
So do you think the reintroduction of the road toll can help?
It will not necessarily help. It will just help the sector, the road sector, because as of now, there are many roads that are still not been done. There are roads that are in the hinterlands where food and produce, harvested produce, needs to come to the midlands. But because of the nature of the roads, the time of harvest and the time of transportation before it gets to the market, and the elasticity of those products cannot meet consumer demand. So all this being put in place, I don't think introduction of road tolls will make any change. But the challenge of road toll initially, according to some consumers, had to do with the fact that it caused huge amount of traffic. People were suggesting that we have automated road tolls where you just get there, you pay and you move. That will be in a way, every country has it. So if we can modernize our road toll activity, it is in a way acceptable as a country, because you can't have your roads in good shape without maintenance, and all those things come at a cost.
Okay. For me, not being so much of a business person, if I ask you to paint a picture of the Ghanaian economy, which has gone to the extent that we have to go to the IMF, how will you describe the Ghanaian economy?
As of now, I don't think we are at a better place right now as a country. So I may say it is a bit gloomy, because you don't know whether to step back or to go forward. In a sense that the whole conversation, the whole structure or body language of the finance minister, because the finance minister influences the spending ability of every nation. And if, as a finance ministry, consistently give out figures and later on come and say, right now we need to go back to what we initially promised, the only thing that has to do with financing has to do with transparency. When there's transparency in terms of expenditure, initially there was demand by the minority, there was demand by people in regards to COVID-19 expenditure. This afternoon, we got a release from the IMF when they came to meet the Ghana. According to some of the figures, demands that they are making to Ghana in order to get a bailout is that the government of Ghana needs to do a COVID-19 expenditure audit in order to bring investors. All these things investors look at before they make investment. Already the CD is facing some challenges. There's been depreciation of over 6.3 in the first 3 months of the year. All these factors investors look at before they intend to put their money where their mouth is.
So from all you've said that Ghana has a lot of potentials. Do you think we have to hold on, or this is the time to go to the IMF?
We actually have to go to the IMF, first of all, because if the leadership decides something, we follow, because we vote for a government, and government's direction, sometimes we may not understand the kind of discussion that goes behind closed door. They know the reality when they look at the books. We analyze based on the factors and the numbers and the figures from the statistical service, CSOs, and make sure that whatever we say is in line with happenings. And realistically, Ghana should go to the IMF with a debt level as to GDP to the tune of 79%. We need to go to the IMF. With the CD where it is heading, we need to go to the IMF. With inflation ranging at 27.6%, we need to go to the IMF. Nonetheless, it shouldn't be we going to the IMF because we need help. We should go into the IMF to need structural reform in terms of policy, because it appears we are doing whatever we feel like doing, but we are not doing according to what is favorable for our economic situation. Every week, we keep seeing fuel price rising. What is the mitigating factor? How can we solve it? Surprisingly, the poor are getting poorer, the rich are getting richer.
So are you saying that our journey to the IMF shouldn't only be to get funds, but to get ideas on how to structure the economy?
Exactly. We need policy advice. We need policy direction. We need to let investors, because initially Ghana used to be those countries in Africa that had huge investor confidence across the world. When it comes to buying or sale of Euro bonds, once we step into the market, every investor runs and invests with us. But currently, we have not had that privilege in the last 6 months because the ratings didn't favor us to that extent. So we can't borrow on the international market. We have to rely on domestic borrowing. And consistently for the past 3 months, the government of Ghana has not been able to meet its targeted borrowing in the domestic market. With that being said, I think already it is crowding out capital from the private sector. Already the interest rate is going up because the Bank of Ghana consistently decide to use the monetary policy rate to control inflation. And we have seen that this has worked in the last couple of months because we've seen the CD becoming stable for some time. We've seen the borrowing also becoming stable for some time. So we are hoping that these measures will, in a way, bring down the burden on the ordinary Ghanaian. This is where we are asking that how is the life of the ordinary Ghanaian? If the ordinary Ghanaian can say he's comfortable with what he's paying at a transport fare, is comfortable with the food he buys when he joins the queue at any wache seller, whatever it is that contributes to the standard of living of the ordinary Ghanaian is what should be the priority. That is poverty alleviation policies.
What should we expect in the coming months?
In the coming month, I am looking forward with this structural conversation with the IMF. First of all, it is a positive signal for the currency in the sense that we have been hearing capital flight. Capital flight. There's instances where businesses, because of the fear of inflation, holding on to money, they decide to send their money outside the country. But when this announcement came up, it's going to bring stability to the city. Because they will say, oh, yes, this country have decided to do something about their alien economy. Therefore, let me keep my money and see where we are headed. Because they will also be thinking about expanding their operations in other countries. But with the onset of this conversation, it is quite optimistic for investors. But when you look at it internally, it appears the apprehension towards IMF because we've decided to politicize the whole structure of this IMF conversation, which is wrong. Because the economy doesn't understand politics. The economy understands policy and principles. So if you are not doing something policy-wise, in principle, it will come back and haunt you in the following year.
Right. So COVID-19 has affected the global economy. Where is the global economy and where is Ghana's economy?
The global economy, where it stands now, generally, the conversation, or let's say the war between Russia and Ukraine, has restructured geopolitics because the U.S. government is for Ukraine. The whole world system looks subtly like in a war silently fighting against Russia. Nonetheless, these two countries control huge supply of export of grain and other minerals to the rest of the world, especially when it comes to energy. Russia supplies huge amounts of energy to Europe. So with this being said, if you decide to fight Russia, or let's say get engaged, for some time Russia was banned from exporting fuel to other countries. But when this war began, all countries that are industry-driven became stagnant because there was not enough fuel to power the economy. Countries that usually buy fuel at a cheaper price, crude oil at a cheaper price, were forced to buy at higher prices because they have to go to another extent or go to other marketers to buy at higher price because of demand. But all these factors put in place, the world economy was not in a good place since the onset of COVID. And the worst case is when the Russia-Ukraine war came in. Secondly, there's general inflation rise across the world. Everywhere food prices are going up, and it is serious in most places. We are here, we are feeling it, but not as much as other countries where they can't even supply. Maize is out of stock in some countries, so they have to import maize. Some countries have to fall on just cattle feed in order to survive. So all these things are disturbing instances of food insecurity globally. So
wrapping up, someone posed this question to me. I didn't know what to say, but I think I should ask you too. We were told that if E-Levy is passed, we won't go to the IMF. Now that we are going to the IMF, do you think it's wise to cancel the E-Levy?
I don't think it's wise to cancel the E-Levy. even though the E-Levy in itself was a policy that began with a lot of apprehension, if you look at our books right now, when you look at the inflow of local revenue, like generated revenue, it is not good. We don't have enough revenue coming through because, first of all, we have not been able to deal with the revenue loopholes. There's a lot of loopholes in our revenue. If we are to take the Auditor General's report and assess how much we lose in terms of revenue, trust me, the E-Levy will be an non-entity, it will be non-existent, or it will not even be necessary for us to be having the discussion. If we can go to the extent to cut down expenditure from department to sectorial to ministry, MMDAs, all the unnecessary expenditures, cut down on certain level of ministry, trust me, we can have enough money that will be 3 times more than E-Levy. Because if you look at our budget, most of our expenditure go into repayment of loans, loan settlement, and also goes into payment of salaries and arrears. All these things are things that cut down investment in health, investment in education, all these things. So the fear initially is that when IMF comes in, the free SHS will be abolished. But it is not always the case where when IMF comes in, a social policy is abolished. IMF, first of all, looks at which social policy has direct impact in policy alleviation. Education is key. Health is key. That is why they did not take away the free health insurance scheme, Ghana Health Insurance Scheme, but they still maintain it even when we went under IMF. But still, this SHS, they will encourage us to go on it, but possibly at the control level because of the amount of money that goes into it. If audit is to be done, it will determine whether we should pursue it because are we investing our money and what is the outcome? Right. All these things being in place. Wrapping
up, my last question. I know I said that's my last question, but IMF E-Levy, do you think the ordinary Ghanaian can handle it?
The ordinary Ghanaian have decided to relinquish the control, or let's say the governance of a country to a government, to a person. So what the person has decided to do, that the president has decided to do, is to go to the IMF. Whether the Ghanaians can handle it is an issue of greater debate because, first of all, the Ghanaian cost of living is high. That is a fact as of now, as a fact. Inflation and everything have gone up. Salaries have still remained the same. As in how long that is going to be, we don't know when. The real discussion that I'm hoping labor union can do, instead of just discussing based on what teacher unions can do, what this union can do, if we are having the conversations of salary based on unionized conversation, trust me, we can have an organized labor structure that, first of all, is policy driven, where we can say when inflation goes high, then salary automatically is becoming adjusted to a certain level. So that is the conversation we need. But IMF E-Levy is not too good for us as a country, but it's good for us in the international front, and let's hope we can get something better coming forward or going forward in the next few months.
Thank you very much for joining me. I'm very grateful.
Thank you.
That was my colleague, Winston Tackie, breaking down what really IMF is and what we should expect in the coming months.